This is Bitsy Tulloch, and you are listening to Superman and Lois and Pals.
Greetings, super friends. Welcome to Superman and Lois and Pals. I'm Henry Bernstein, and alongside me is my favorite super pal, Professor Sam Brody. Hello, Sam Brody.
Hello, Henry Bernstein.
Hello. Let's talk about Superman and Lois Season 4, Episode 6, When the Lights Come On. This was directed by Ian Samoil, written by Kristi Korzec and Brent Fletcher. The Apple TV and IMDb description is Luthor plans to move LuthorCorp to Smallville, but finds opposition in Lana. Sarah faces a difficult decision. Clark confronts Luthor face to face. Big takeaways from this is we're starting to get the idea that people know the secret, and Clark kind of knows that people know.
Hmm.
And it's just starting to bubble up. My first thought was like, oh, they are doing the thing that we talked about where at the end, the town of Smallville will protect him or whatever. But I love that the first bit about this was Clark being dorky about his salt and pepper patch in his hair that
Uh-huh.
Superman has to buy just for men because he's Superman, not because he's Clark Kent. Like, that's pretty
Yeah.
good.
That was interesting and that was fun because I have not seen that in any I don't think I've seen that in any Superman before. That was cute.
No, I mean, in fact, we've seen gray-haired Superman before. Certainly, Kingdom Come is the most iconic
Hmm.
look. Even recently, in the last couple of years in the comics, they had that comic after War World where he was aged up a little bit and he had the
Hmm.
the 90s Hal Jordan streaks and other versions of that, but never to the point where Clark Kent felt the need that the vanity of Superman is a really interesting thing to think about, right?
Right. Well, when they do older Superman, the whole point of the gray is just to signal quickly that it's older Superman. And like it's always supposed to look distinguished and it's always supposed to look kind of like give him gravitas. They never make it a subject of anxiety or like something that
Mhm.
he's going to like get worried about like a regular middle-aged guy.
Right, which this and then this they kind of
Hmm.
played it like that. Like he does have that sort of middle-aged
Hmm.
anxiety thing, and maybe it's directly tied in with like having to appear as Superman in public. But it's very funny to see Clark vain like that, or at least anxious about it. And like every comic book reader knows, he looks great with gray, and like you said, distinguished. And it's usually in the future where everyone else is super old, and so Superman's only like a little old. Obviously, Kingdom
Hmm.
Come is the best example of that. Like Bruce is like old and decrepit, and Superman has just got a little gray and a little, wrinkle under his eye. So that was I like that. That was fun. Yeah. So anyway, it's just interesting to see Clark like that.
It
Um,
makes sense to me that like his rationale to me made sense that like because whenever we see it in comics or whatever, it's always a big time jump. They don't show it as it happens.
mm,
And so it does make sense to me that he would think that like people might get the wrong idea or people might perceive that Superman is weak if they see the gray start to appear.
mm,
And it's not something that you have to deal with if you just jump ahead 30 years or something.
mm.
Because
Yeah.
everyone is used to it.
Yeah, I mean, is that a sign of weakness? I mean, in a patriarchal society, like men who have gray hair, like you said, they're considered distinguished. Is for Superman, is that a sign of weakness?
Well, what I think is that like if people have it in their heads that he's immortal or something, then aging visibly is like proof that in fact there is some like horizon of mortality for him.
Hmm.
And in
Hmm.
that sense, it's weakness.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the we talk we've talked many, many times about the various things that are a sliding scale within Superman, whether it's vulnerability to kryptonite, power level, one, and I guess mortality is one of those too, and they even showed something interesting in this episode. Jonathan was doing a scene where he was eating like a ton of food at once because he had, I guess, his metabolism needed it, which is a very like Wally West in the 90s thing. And I probably Barry Allen in the 60s and 70s. I'm not as familiar, but I remember that being a Wally West thing, like going after saving the world or saving Keystone City, going to Big Belly Burger and eating like 15 burgers at super speed or in the Watchtower or something. So they showed Jonathan doing that. But Superman traditionally actually doesn't need to eat, right? Like he likes to eat.
Hmm.
So I thought that was interesting that Jonathan kind of has, and that would make sense. Jonathan is only half Kryptonian. So these things are malleable within this show, and I guess Clark going gray is one of them. Although I think we're to understand, and maybe they said it explicitly, but that Clark going gray has to do with his human heart,
Hmm.
maybe, right?
That seemed more or less on the surface to me. They
Yeah.
didn't say it, but I read it that way.
Okay. Great. I had to take exception to one thing. Oh, first of all, Lana going toe to toe with Luthor. God, I know I've given Lana just an absolute beating these last 4 years, but going toe to toe with Luthor was just A plus, A
Hmm.
plus. But I got to take exception to Sarah calling Luthor a bald-headed loser, as if those two things were connected. And, to quote Larry David from the episode Trick or Treat, that's a hate crime. We're a group, the bald community. Okay. And so, I don't care if Lex Luthor chose it as a look to cultivate for himself. He may be a loser, but it is not because he is bald.
Clearly, Sarah doesn't spend enough time on woke social media where they will tell her that, like, Lex Luthor won't see your anti-bald person tweet, but your bald friends will.
She's an anti-baldite.
Yeah.
I just, as a proud bald man who never won a baldy in the 90s from Mike Carlin, I take exception to that.
Fair
It,
enough.
it was funny, but speaking of Sarah, she wants to go abroad in high school. Like, I know it's not unheard of, but it seems odd. Like, did is that a thing? Especially that like a poor kid from Kansas could
I
do?
don't think it's particularly common, no.
I mean, I like my wife did an exchange program for a summer or, maybe a semester, but she sounds like she's just gonna go hop around Europe for her junior year of high school and
It's just kind of like a Gossip Girl crossover or something. Like, I don't know what high school in Kansas sends their kids abroad.
Is this the Sarah spinoff? Are we going to get a full
Yeah.
episode of Sarah in Europe that will serve as the soft pilot for
Sarah in Paris.
Sarah in Paris? Yes, yes, the on Netflix. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really know, and I'm not sure why they're setting it up either, because there's like not enough episodes. There's so few episodes left that they don't need to set up any justification for us to miss her,
Yeah,
you
I,
know?
I
So
know.
like I was not really sure about that.
Yeah.
Um,
It's fine. I mean, they're kind of wrapping up her story, which is totally cool with me. I mean, as long as it's not drama stuff with Jordan, like it's good.
mhm.
And if that's what she needs to do as a character to find herself, I don't know why as a 16, 17-year-old she needs to find herself in that way. Seems kind of dangerous for her to bop around Europe as a underage
Also,
woman, but
what happened to the music? Like,
oh yeah, she's a musician.
couldn't she just go on tour? Like, see America first, you know?
Right. Right. Like hop in the car and yeah, go play some clubs around. Yeah, that's right. She's a musician. I totally forgot about that. So it feels like they've kind of forgot about it too.
Just like Sophie.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. She's just going. I think she walked by during the wedding, but she
I mean, remember that whole scary thing where they had like the Otis did the home invasion and tried to beat up Lana? There was no Sophie in
no Sophie
any of
anywhere.
those
Yeah. Yeah,
scenes.
I gotta say that was Lana getting beat up by Luthor's goons. Like that's spot on. That's
Hmm.
taken straight from the comics. We talked about that a couple episodes ago about literally in Superman number 2 that
Hmm.
that happening. And I love that Sarah is the one that effed up Otis with a baseball bat.
Hmm.
Just a good old baseball bat under the bed. They didn't need to explain it later with Kyle being like, "I'm glad I put that under every bed," or Sarah saying that her dad told. Like, we
Hmm.
get it. You have a baseball. You're three young women living alone. It's reasonable that you would have a baseball bat. You don't have to explain why. But yeah, that was kind of fun seeing Otis, yeah, this Otis isn't quite as lovable as the Otis in Superman the movie, so I was perfectly happy with seeing him get beat up.
Yeah,
And it's kind
nothing.
of a funny reoccurring thing that he keeps getting beat up, and that Luthor hasn't just killed him or fired him.
That's the only funny thing about him. There's nothing else funny.
Yeah. All right, so let's get into like the fight scene. So you messaged me when we were kind of setting up time to talk. You messaged me, what did you think of the episode? And I said I loved it. You very much did not, and sort of interested in talking about that. Before we get into the fight, does your opinion of this episode tie into the fight? Because mine does.
It wasn't mainly about the fight, so maybe you should take it first because you were more focused on it, whereas I was more general.
Okay. So yeah, we'll kind of wrap up with that maybe. So first of all, I love the idea of Clark versus Lex. I think that is a really cool. I always loved in the comics when Lex Luthor was bothered by Clark Kent as a reporter. He mostly found him annoying. But I don't know. There never is enough Clark versus Lex, and I like the idea of it getting physical this time. I don't think we've ever really seen that. And
Hmm.
I loved the red sun power inhibitor. I thought that was a great touch, and it tied in perfectly with Bizarro. Like, of course he would have that technology. He was the one who captured Bizarro successfully and turned him into Doomsday. So it's not a great leap that all of a sudden Lex, who we just are assuming is brilliant, they haven't shown us much of that, is able to harness what gives that Superman power and takes away from the other one. So I really like that.
I thought that it was more like, well, I guess they needed to have this to have there be a fight. And like, I don't know, when did he retrofit all of the streetlights in Smallville with
Without
red?
Lana noticing.
Yeah, I don't know when did that happen. And
Okay.
also, has it always been immediate that he just has no powers at all the second there's red sunlight?
Well, that's
Like,
part of the sliding scale of
right.
right. You're right. Yeah, I mean, you're right, Sam. Like in traditionally, if Superman goes somewhere with a red sun, over time his powers diminish, like in the
Hmm.
Exile storyline or something like that. You're absolutely right. But I think for the purposes of this, that's so interesting, that you picked up on that. I was just sort of bought in, like, let's go, Mortal Kombat, fight.
Hmm.
I was just kind of into it. I thought the choreography was really good. I loved the brutality of it. I loved the red glow. I watched some of the behind the scenes stuff thought was really good. And I really liked seeing that side of Clark slash Tyler Hoechlin. Like, Tyler's been putting in the work. And it made me wonder, this was a question you asked back in season 1 when we still didn't know what this universe was.
Hmm.
And I don't remember what the context was, but you had sort of asked the question generally, how does Superman know how to fight? Like, did Bruce Wayne train him?
Hmm.
And so I did think of that. Like, how does Clark Kent know how to fight? Like, did Jonathan Kent, original, his father take him, to the barn one day and just show him how to fight, or did he have to defend himself in school? We've seen that before. How did all of a sudden Clark know how to fight and fight so well that he beat the crap out of hulking ex-con Lex Luthor?
Right. And, we haven't seen, like, in the flashbacks that they've done, which have all been very focused on his family or on Lois. So we haven't seen, like, the sort of Lex Luthor that does martial arts training, but often they'll show that, right? Like,
Yes,
Luthor
yes.
is always training with, like, Mercy
Right.
or some robots, and he's always, like, pretty good. Like,
Or
like if you,
remember when he's Lex Luthor too, a big part of the right during the Death of Superman storyline was he killed Sasha, his trainer,
oh yeah, because
because
she
she
beat
beat him.
him,
She beat
right?
him and he killed
Uh-huh.
her. And that was
I
like a
remember
kind
that.
of an ongoing storyline. That was really when we saw him as like really villainous.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So they haven't done that. So like, but we're just assuming that he can fight because he is a big guy and he was in prison. But like, yeah, I thought it was fine. Like, I didn't object to it. Actually, I didn't object to it to such an extent that I thought it was like annoying that they included the one or two lines about how he shouldn't have sunk to his level or whatever. I was like,
Yeah.
that's not his level. His
Yeah.
level is way lower than that.
Yeah.
Like having a street brawl is not Lex Luthor's level. Like it's
It's
fine.
killing people. Yeah, I also
Yeah.
thought that was the one part I was like, it kind of diminished. I loved the fight, and I'm not like a bloodthirsty action person when it comes to Superman. Like, I'm much more interested in Clark and Lois interacting on the porch than I'm into any kind of punchy punchy kick.
Hmm.
But I really enjoyed this because it was different and it was, if you're gonna do like gritty, grounded, whatever,
Hmm.
like I thought this was cool. It was like a nice thing. And so I didn't like that, yeah, Clark diminished it. Like,
The thing that was missing from me,
mm,
and it maybe is, it's hard to put my finger on because like they've done a lot to build this Lex up, and they've given us flashbacks and shown us that he was there in the past. But maybe it's because we haven't seen specifically the like him as a Superman villain part of the past.
Lex Luthor.
Yeah. Like we've seen him, he'd been a sort of Lois Lane villain. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like
Oh,
they haven't
absolutely.
they didn't show us like it felt like Clark was fighting on behalf of other people rather
Right.
than himself.
Right.
And so to me, that took away a little bit from the thing that you were talking about, where it's like Clark Kent versus Lex
Hmm.
Luthor.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because like what would have made it cathartic is like if you imagine like, I don't know, like in the world that we actually live in, right? We have journalists and some of them become nationally famous and then they just like suck.
What
Or
do you mean by suck? Like in their
I'm thinking
job or
about
as
I'm no,
people?
I'm thinking like about Matt Taibbi and the Twitter files. Like that kind of thing where you
Say more.
just
What is that?
so like back in the day before Elon Musk
Ruined.
completely transformed Twitter, shall we
Right.
say.
Right.
And it's a joke now, right? Because the point of the Twitter files was to expose the idea that the previous owners of Twitter had collaborated with the government to, in the view of the project, like suppress conservative speech, right? Whereas now it's like an active arm of the Republican campaign and like no
Hmm.
one cares, right?
Hmm.
But back then it was like supposed to be this big scandal that like
Oh, that like
anti
Jack Dorsey was like suppressing Republic.
anti-lockdown
Oh.
stuff maybe was suppressed or something. Like I don't
Mm.
really remember. It was like not a big story. But
Okay.
the point is that they were acting like it was a big story. And like Matt Taibbi got like who I used to respect like 20 years ago as a journalist was like, I'm releasing this. And it's like you're releasing this because Elon Musk owns Twitter now and he gave you access to all of this because he wants it out there. It's like not really journalism,
Hmm.
it's like
Hmm.
a billionaire invited you in and asked you to do his bidding and you said yes. So it's like, so but my point is like if you imagine the like the distance that ought to exist between this sort of untouchable, above the law figure and the person whose life project it is to like bring this person to justice, but who always fails, right? That's like Clark Kent as a journalist to me. And then to have an actual physical altercation where the person who never wins finally gets a chance to win, that would have made it cathartic. But various elements of the story made that not the story, right? Because he wasn't above the law, he did go to jail, and he didn't deserve it on this particular case. And instead he was getting beat up because of like other stuff. It wasn't even in, I don't know.
Yeah, no, it had nothing to do. It was completely personal. It was
It was
all
right.
Clark
Like,
going to defend the honor of his family. So
and also himself. Like he did
Yeah.
did get killed by the monster that has
Mhm.
been gone for 2 episodes now, and we don't know what's up with it.
Lois reached him. He's not interested.
Okay.
Come on, Beauty and the Beast, Sam.
We just
The
talked
tale
Doomsday
as old as time.
talk Doomsday out of being Doomsday. Fine.
Yes.
So anyway,
Doomsday needs love too, Sam.
okay. Anyway, so I had no problem with the fact that they were fighting. There were just like a few little things that were kind of missing it from to be like a super cool scene that I'll always remember kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like as something that made sense in that episode, it was fine. It was great.
Okay, great. I liked Sarah flying with the boys. I don't think we'd seen that before.
Mm-hmm.
And then the end, I liked the end with I like when Gretchen's like, get you a killer suit, and they did like a great pull-out shot and tease of the LexCorp building, which I didn't really understand because they've shown the LexCorp building full on, so I don't know why they needed to tease it. But I liked the tease of like, we're gonna get the Lex Luthor we know and love.
I actually have a weird thing I really liked about that was like the specific room that they were in the horizontal part of the L. I don't know why, but I thought that was just really cool.
That was really cool. Yeah. Because I feel like when he's in the comics, it's always like the long part of the L. Like that's where his main office is, right? Don't you kind of, if you're picturing Crisis of the Crimson Kryptonite where he's beating Superman with the rock, I always picture that, or Superman floating outside. I'm watching you, Luthor. It always feels like the vertical part. Yeah, you're right.
It just made it feel somehow more like a real office building that happens to be in the shape of an L rather than like a cartoon thing. I don't know why, but it was a very effective shot for me.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Not for that reason, but now in retrospect, definitely for that reason. Maybe that's why I liked it so much. Yeah. Anything else about this episode?
Don't think so. Looking forward to seeing whatever they were hinting at there.
Me too. All right. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Henry.
Thanks for listening. Our theme was composed and performed by Sam Bernstein. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss another thrilling adventure of Superman and Lois and Pals.
This is Bitsy Tulloch, and you are listening to Superman and Lois and Pals.